A German baron walked through American military guards, found General Patton, and demanded his castle back. Patton listened to every word. Then he told the baron exactly what the castle was going to be used for instead. The baron's face went white. May 1945. Germany is defeated. The Third Army needs a headquarters in Bavaria, and Patton finds a castle. Ancient stone walls, grand halls with 20-foot ceilings, views across the valley for miles. It's perfect. He moves in. Maps go up. Radio equipment fills the rooms. American soldiers walk the halls where Bavarian nobility had lived for 4 centuries. For 3 weeks, everything runs smoothly. Then a man shows up at the gate. Polished shoes, tailored suit, pocket watch on a chain, chin slightly raised, shoulders back, the posture of someone who has never once had to ask for anything, because things were simply given to him. He identifies himself as the Baron, the owner, and he wants his castle back. Not requests, not asks, demands. What happens next is one of the most memorable confrontations of the entire occupation, and almost nobody talks about it. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand what a Bavarian castle in 1945 actually meant. This wasn't just a building. It was a physical argument. Built in the 1500s during the height of the Holy Roman Empire. Stone walls 4 feet thick in places. Corner towers. A central courtyard. Grand halls lined with family portraits going back generations, stern faces in period dress, staring down at anyone who entered, reminding them exactly where they stood in the order of things. The furniture was still there. Heavy oak tables carved with the family crest. Tapestries. A library of leather-bound volumes, some of them centuries old. Everything preserved, maintained, handed down as though it would never end. And below the castle, visible from every window, a village. The same village, where the families who worked the Baron's land had lived for just as many generations as the Baron's family had lived above them. That was the system. That was what the castle symbolized. Not just wealth, the idea that some people were simply born to own things, and others were born to serve them. Patton had just spent 3 years helping destroy the regime that system had helped produce. And now the system was standing in his office, asking for its castle back. The Baron was brought into Patton's office, which happened to be the castle's original formal receiving room, where generations of nobility had held court. He made his case calmly. The family had owned the castle since 1543, 400 years. His ancestors had built it. His family crest was carved above the main entrance. He understood the Americans needed facilities. He acknowledged that, but surely there were other buildings. Other options. He would appreciate it if General Patton would arrange for his home to be vacated. He genuinely believed this was reasonable. That was the detail Patton couldn't get past. Germany had just lost a war it started. A war that had killed 50 million people. This man was standing in front of the commanding general of the army that had just conquered his country, and he was asking, politely, for his inconvenience to be resolved. Patton sat behind the Baron's own desk, in the Baron's own castle, and stared at him. Then he started asking questions. Your family has owned this for 400 years. What did they do exactly? The Baron looked momentarily confused. They administered, kept order, protected the people. Protected them from what? From chaos. Disorder. They provided structure, stability, while living in a castle. Yes, of course. And the people who worked your land, where did they live? In the village. In houses. Not castles. No, of course not. Patton stood up, walked to the window, looked down at the valley below. The same view the Baron's ancestors had looked at for 400 years. Then he turned around. If this conversation is going where you think it's going, you're right. Don't go anywhere. Here's what I think your ancestors actually did, Patton said. They were born into families that owned land. They inherited titles they didn't earn. They collected rents from people who worked. They lived in luxury, while the people who produced everything lived in poverty, and they called it service. The Baron's face reddened. General, that's not. I'm not finished. Your family lived here for 400 years in comfort and privilege because of an accident of birth. Not because they were smarter. Not because they worked harder. Because their great-great-grandfather happened to be born in the right bed. And your country, the country your aristocracy either helped build or quietly enabled, just started a war that killed 50 million people and ran camps where they murdered millions more. So don't come in here talking to me about family heritage. The Baron had gone silent. You want your castle back. Patton continued. Let me tell you what's going to happen instead. He sat back down. I'm going to keep using this building, but not as a headquarters. Then what? A stable. The Baron's face went pale. For horses. We have a lot of them. Good ventilation in here. Strong floors. I'm estimating your ballroom fits about 30 horses. The formal dining hall, another 20, 70, maybe 80 total. That's desecration. This building has history. Culture. So did the cities your country bombed. So did the people your country murdered. Culture didn't stop you then. I had nothing to do with that. Patton looked at him. You had everything to do with it. You and every other aristocrat who thought their bloodline made them special. Who thought tradition mattered more than human decency. Who supported or tolerated a government that turned barbarism into policy. He called for his aid. When the man appeared, the order came without hesitation. Get engineers in here. I want this building converted to stables, maximum capacity. And get the Baron's family crest off the wall above the entrance. Replace it with something appropriate. Within a week, the engineers were inside. Stalls built into the grand hall. Hay storage where generations of aristocrats had gathered for formal events. Water troughs in the dining room. The smell of horses in corridors hung with centuries of oil paintings. Patton made sure the Baron received updates. Reports. Photographs of horses being led through the main entrance under where the family crest had been. It wasn't just practical. It was a message, delivered in the only language the old world seemed to understand. Your title means nothing now. Your bloodline means nothing. 400 years of tradition nothing. This is what it's worth in the world your regime helped create, and then lost. If you want to see more stories like this one, the ones that got buried, hit subscribe and leave a like. It costs you nothing, and it helps this channel reach people who actually want to find it. Before the Baron walked out, Patton had one more thing to say. He came around the desk. Got close. You actually believed your title meant something. That being born into the right family made you important. That nobility was real. Let me tell you what real nobility looks like. It's the farm boy from Kansas who stormed a beach under machine gun fire because his country asked him to. It's the factory worker from Detroit who spent 3 years building tanks in the dark. It's the medic who died in a field hospital trying to save men he'd never met. Those men were not born noble. They didn't inherit anything. They were born into ordinary families, and they became extraordinary through what they chose to do, not who their parents were. That is nobility. What you have is a title. And right now, in this world, a title is worth less than a horse stall. The Baron left without responding. There was nothing to say. The story moved fast through Bavaria. Other aristocrats heard what had happened. Some wrote letters of protest to occupation authorities. Complained through official channels that Patton was destroying cultural heritage, acting with unnecessary cruelty, overstepping his authority. Patton's response to every single complaint was identical. You lost the war. Your system failed. Your privilege is over. Be grateful you still have your lives. The complaints stopped. Other occupation commanders took note not necessarily of the method, but of the principle underneath it. That the old structures weren't coming back. That rank, title, and lineage from the previous world carried no weight in this one. That the rules had genuinely changed. Some communities in Bavaria, particularly the working families in the valleys below these same castles, quietly celebrated. The system that had kept them at the bottom of a fixed order for generations had just had its symbol turned into a stable. Whatever came next, it wasn't going to look like what came before. Historians have gone back and forth on Patton's decision ever since. The critics argue the Baron wasn't personally responsible for the war, that destroying cultural heritage, centuries of architecture, history, art served no real purpose beyond humiliation, that there's a difference between holding a man accountable for what he did and punishing him for what his ancestors built. The defenders argue something different, that the aristocratic system hadn't just coexisted with the Nazi regime, it had legitimized it. That old world privilege had given cover to new world atrocity. That the symbols of that system weren't neutral objects. They were arguments, and those arguments needed to be answered. Both positions have weight. But here's the question worth sitting with. The Baron walked into that room, genuinely believing his 400 years of family history entitled him to something. Not as a bluff. Not as a negotiation tactic. He actually believed it. What does it mean when a system produces that kind of certainty? And what does it take to break it? After the Americans eventually left, the castle was repurposed again. The stables were removed. But the Baron's family never got their ownership restored. The old world had ended, and Patton characteristically, bluntly, without paperwork or ceremony, had made sure at least one aristocrat understood that. These are the moments that defined what the occupation actually meant. Not the surrender documents, not the tribunals, the small confrontations where someone had to decide what the new rules were and enforce them. That's what this channel is here for. Subscribe to WWII Forgotten Frontline. Drop a like if this story delivered. And tell me in the comments, would you have done what Patton did? Or would you have given the castle back?